In a world where Africans have lost their roots, it has become of vital importance to document our ways. In an effort to reverse the brainwashing of the past, where we were made to believe our ways are demonic, we are pressed to create dignified and respectful platforms to unpack our spiritual ways. Moya light, Moya bright. Welcome back to another amazing episode of Moya Political Series. As you know, it is election year, so it's about to get rough. And I suggest that you stick with Moya so that we learn what's going on. We have the clever people. You know how we roll. Today's episode is even more special because we've got some of our faves in the house. We have Mr. Andile Mngxitama. Thank you so much, Puti, for, every time. The youth want to hear from you and your views. That's why we will be patient with you. Even when you're late or whatever you do, we will humble ourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ntsiki. Yeah.
I'll throw you under the bus.
I
Yes.
can see.
I've got the former Prince Rampedi, who is now Mahasha Rampedi, rising from the ashes. We're always proud of you. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And with Prince Mashele, thank you once again. I hope that you are here to upset the other panel members, as you usually do. Even the audience last time was upset with you. So I hope you bring out your Eunice today.
Thank you. They are my friends. I'm not going to upset them.
And I was saying that I'm bringing enemies together here.
We are certainly ideological enemies.
Why do you?
At least with Prince, no, this comrade, we are cool.
Why do you say that?
He's a right winger. And
You see, you put him on the left and you put me on the right.
Yeah, he doesn't believe that white people took our land. He believes that we voluntarily left because we're lazy to work the land. For him, there is no historical question of forced migrant labor system. For him, there's no 1913 Land Act. Black people are lazy, they don't want to work. They don't want to work the land. They came to the city to work for white people. So his whole orientation, ideologically, is to falsify history in defense of the colonial and apartheid project. So that's what makes...
My grandfather was a migrant laborer, by the way. He worked in the mines for white people who stole black people's land. So I don't know what he's talking about.
No, but in the past, you argued that we came to the city voluntarily. For you, there's no Land Act.
Okay, but let's give him a chance to respond. So, but Prince, the reason I brought you here is because you do differ on certain issues. And Andy, let's just put up the land issue, and I'm going to get to Mahasha after you. But can you start right there, Guti? There's a land issue because now we're moving into election time, and this is actually the issue. So here's Andile saying to you that you don't believe, and this is what he's saying. So what is your stance on that?
Yeah, look, he's right. We are ideological enemies. The reason why I consider him my ideological enemy is because he lies with a straight face. That's my problem. He's lying about me in my presence. He says, I don't know and I don't acknowledge that it was a migrant labor system. I've just told you. My grandfather, it's personal, was a migrant labor abused and exploited by a colonial economic imperialist system. Right? It's a fact, right? So I actually don't know what he's talking about. I don't know where he was before this show. So that's the first thing. But let's be substantive about it. It is true, and I have never denied it anywhere. By the way, you will never find any video or any writing by me, by the way, where I denied that there is no land problem in South Africa. I know about 1913. I know about 1952, when white people came here to settle in the Cape of Good Hope, and how they parceled out land to themselves over a long period of time. And I know that history is still with us today. If you drive around South Africa today, you travel around the country, if you see a big farm, and I drove this morning from Bronkhorstspruit, and I drove through farms, I knew immediately that these farms are not owned by black people. They're owned by white people. So this idea of trying to paint me as if I'm a defender of colonialism, I don't know where it comes from. It comes from people like Andile's heads. So the question is, how do we solve it, right?
Yes.
Maybe that's where him and I have a different approach.
And without getting personal, please, guys,
Yeah.
because I would like to...
Yeah. He believes that we need to have a thing called land expropriation without compensation. That is disorderly, right? That's what he believes. I don't believe in that kind of nonsense.
Okay,
because
wait,
I have seen what it does elsewhere. I can give you examples of it. Don't go far. Go to Zim, here, next door, and look at what it did. And by the way, in the end, the people who advocate that kind of chaos, they either become the beneficiaries, they steal the land for themselves personally. And the majority of black people, they suffer. I don't want black people to suffer. If we address the land issue, let's address it in an orderly way that will benefit, that will not destroy jobs, that will benefit the majority of black people. That's where I come from. It's
Thank
clear.
you. Thank you. Hey, Mahasha, it's off to a hectic start. I don't know where you're even going to go in. You saw that there's this Cape Town wanting to be independent now. And this is now we're talking land. So please, can you put in your kabakabas and hopefully we can bring the energy into a more neutral and less personal space.
Yeah, I think from what Andile said and what my friend Prince has just said, what it all says to all of us is that the South African political landscape has become so complex. You look at the formation of the MK party by former President Jacob Zuma and the kind of momentum that it seems to have created in the country. And you look at how many people seem to be excited about that. A lot of other political parties on the left appear to be coalescing around common issues and common goals. And it says to me that the left in South Africa seems to be getting an edge for the first time in as many years. You look at the number of political parties on the left which appear to be working together, whether the EFF, his own BLF, he was in Kandla, if he's not planning to go there. You look at the PAC leader, he was in Kandla to meet the MK leader, if he has not been there already. And you look at the apparent growth of the EFF as well. It has attracted prominent individuals in recent years. The former public protector, Advocate Usisiwe Mkhwebane, Mazwai, Carl Niehaus's Areta. There's just a lot happening on the left, which has not happened in a very long time. It talks to the issues which Andile and Prince have been tackling now, which is land, which is the issue of poverty, inequality. Whether you agree with their methods is something else. But what is clear now is that the left is rising or is coalescing ahead of the 2024 elections. On the other hand, if you look at the far right or the center right political parties, they seem to be getting more and more away from each other as opposed to any potential coalition. Why am I saying this? There is the Moonshot Pact announced by the DA leader, John Steenhuisen. After the announcement, there was momentum around it. what has since happened, you have seen some members of the Moonshot Pact coming out and raising concerns about John Steenhuisen's own leadership, questioning it and saying we don't think he can be the face of the center right, or the center right or the far right. You have seen new political parties emerging, which seem to be targeting the same voters, which are on the far right of the political spectrum. Whether you talk about Zongeza Zibi, Rise Mzansi, whose members include former DA leaders such as Makashule Ghana and Kumara Mulefo, whether you talk about Roger Jardine, new political party. Roger Jardine has always been associated with the right or the center right, even though he comes from the business community, he's a former banker. But the fact that someone like him, who at some point was touted as the potential face of the Moonshot Pact, is now breaking away from that formidable formation to establish his own party. The fact that we have former DA leaders, forming their own parties. The fact that you had a breakaway party in the form of Action SA, even though they still target or speak for more or less the same constituency, you can see that they are not getting closer and closer as they would have liked, compared to, say, 10 years ago, when you had Helen Zille establishing a formidable coalition of the right or the far right or the center right, convince a lot of smaller parties to come on board. Currently, that seems to be happening on the center left or the far left of the political spectrum. And that's where I see the issues of land and other contentious issues in the country being likely to be sorted out. I'm not saying they will win the election and sort out that, but you can see that there's now clarity as to which grouping stands for what, and which groupings opposes what. And here, in conclusion, I've not said anything about the ANC. Obviously, I expect, like many South Africans, a national coalition government. A lot of people have said the ANC is likely to not play any significant role. I still see them playing a role, but not necessarily as a kingmaker or as a king after the elections. But I don't see them being relegated outside completely without them playing a role. I see them, working with one of the groupings after the elections. Which one, I don't know. But I think the center left is likely to have an edge after the elections, and whichever government is going to emerge is likely to be dominated by the center left.
And do you have
parties.
any thoughts on what Mahasha is saying?
No, I think his analysis is fairly correct in terms of the reconfiguration of the political situation in the country. The emergence of Umkhonto weSizwe is, I think, the most exciting possibility, because I think that they're going to harm the ANC in a big way, following the agenda which the ANC has abandoned, which is represented by President Zuma of radical economic transformation. And central to that is the land question. You cannot understand the South African reality, how we came to here, where we are poor as black people, we are in the township, we need to get work from white people, if you don't understand the land question. And radical economic transformation is going to have to put the land question back into the agenda in a more honest way, because the land question has become a political football which is being taken out during the elections and immediately dropped off. That parliament is a majority black parliament, but it's failing to amend the constitution. White people, they use the political power to serve themselves. They excluded us so that they create a fake majority where they make laws to take our land, amongst others, to force us to become migrant laborers amongst others, to the industry and mining that is there today is created out of our enslavement in our own country. So unless we address this question and robustly, we will remain tenants in our own country, and Bafana will never win any games because it is a national team which does not represent territory. A nation is about territory, and we as black people are simply tenants in this country as a result of a historical process, and we want that land. It is ours. By the way, I don't want even to farm, Prince. I just want the land because it was stolen from us. I want to wake up in the morning and look at my land and say, Izwe. That's it.
Okay. Look, this year, I regard it like it's 1994. Why? Something fundamental is going to happen this year of a magnitude similar to what happened in 1994. We are going through what political scientists call a realignment moment. What happens when you go through a realignment moment is that the dominant force that held society together disintegrates. In 1994, the dominant force that held South Africa together before 1994 was the National Party. It disintegrated. When that happens, a few things follow. One, you see the emergence of a new force that will take over from the dying force. Two, you see anxiety and fear in society. People become fearful of the future and uncertain of what is going to happen. 1994, that's exactly where we were. That's exactly where we are now. South Africans are fearful. They're not sure what's going to happen. Why? Because the dominant force that used to hold South Africa from 1994 to where we are, it's disintegrating. What force is it? It's the ANC. The ANC is disintegrating before our eyes. So South Africans are not sure what's going to happen. What will the future look like? So that's the framework. But what has South Africa been about? South Africa, politically, if you were to summarize it in 2 minutes, South Africa has been about who dominates this country between black people and white people. That's our history. Who dominates it, right? White people for the longest time, they came up with the English had their own strategy, the Afrikaners had their own strategy, but they agreed that they must dominate. In 1994, it was understood and accepted by all that black people would dominate and the political instrument would be the ANC. And there is an important role that was played by the ANC, by the way, and we must acknowledge this. It is probably the only party since 1994 that brought black people across the country together. Whether you were in KZN, you were in the Northwest or Mpumalanga, you felt you belonged to this thing. It's yours. If you remove the ANC out of that space, you'd struggle to find a party that did that, by the way, that united all of us. So when the ANC disintegrates, there is a great danger of black people remaining without something that unites them across the board. But the ANC also played a critical role. It added an element of multiracialism, which is what explains the failures of the PAC. And he has come from the PAC. The reason why the PAC failed is because it said we are going to send white people to the sea. And do you know who rejected the PAC? It's not white people, it's black people. Black people said, no, we don't agree with that nonsense. We want to live with white people in South Africa, right?
I see you, Mahasha.
Yes,
I
it's
see
true.
you.
Look, if you look at the elections results since 1994, the PAC has been decimated, right? Because black people have been rejecting it. They've been singing Israel to my land. Black people don't want that stuff.
I think you're the only person who feels like that in the room, but please go ahead. Mahasha's about to jump in.
I don't mind. But you see...
It's a distortion of
No.
history
I have
again.
facts behind me. The ANC has been winning elections. Number one. Number two, the ANC since 1955, it has said South Africa belongs to all who live in it, right? Black people have embraced that kind of politics. The danger now, what I'm seeing, let's now come to what is going on, is that when black people, when this force disintegrates that used to unite black people, then black people become scattered. They form 1,000 political parties. Everyone from the black side of things wants to be a leader. That's what we are witnessing now. He's dignifying this entire thing. He calls it the left. There's nothing left. If you look at that whole collection of these parties that are emerging, right, that he calls the left, it's people who have a history of personal problems, right? Zuma, for example, there's nothing left about Zuma. What is left about Zuma? Zuma actually sold this country to the Guptas, to Indians, right? And looted the state and collapsed it. He is the guy who collapsed our state. What's left about collapsing the state?
Liar.
And the victims, by the way, are black.
Okay, so I'm gonna let everybody speak. Mahasha, I know you've got you. I saw your face there. Can I
Okay.
give you the mic?
Yeah, let me start with the stuff about the left before I respond to the other ones.
Yeah.
I do not necessarily agree with Prince when he says there is nothing called the left. It's just a collection of individuals with problems. I think that is premised on the belief, which is fallacious, that there is the good and the bad in society. There are people who are fighting a good fight, and there are those who are stealing, and there are those who are cleaning up in the country, and there are those who are causing a mess in the country. And that divide is almost racial, and that divide is also almost based on class. Why am I saying this? If you look at the people that he is rejecting, that he calls, I'm paraphrasing, he didn't use that word. He's actually implying that they're a bunch of thieves.
Yes, they are.
Okay, no thanks. In most cases, if you look at those individuals, some of them have got a history of fighting for or advocating for land redistribution in the country. Most of them have got a history of advocating for or championing for changes, radical changes in the country. Most of them have been at the forefront of demanding structural economic reforms in the country. Some of them have been at the forefront of fighting against the racialized economy, or fighting racism in the country. Some of them have been complaining about the status quo, which is still favoring white people in the country. Yes, there are those who have been found on the wrong side of the law, but it's not everybody on the left who has been found on the wrong side of the law. They may have been accused, most of them, but some of the cases which were brought against them have proven to be baseless, if not collapsing in court. Who brought the cases against those people? In most cases, it's the dominant force of the day, which is mostly on the right. It's a case, in my view, of people who are out to persecute their political opponents using state power and using resources, using the economy. What happened in the past, for example, we have had people whom Prince is implying that are saints and they are God-given, they are God-chosen to come and rescue South Africa, being found on the wrong side of the law as well. You have had people on the right, whether you talk about white-owned companies like Steinhoff, whether you talk about EOH, but they were never persecuted by the dominant force of the day, which would have created another group of people on the right who would have been regarded, rightfully so, as a bunch of thieves. They seem to be protected by the system, even when they are wrong. You have had, for example, people being found by the law to have committed crimes. We had the Competition Commission coming up with investigations in the past against, the bread cartel. The owners of those companies are white people. They were never prosecuted, which would have made them to also qualify to be called a bunch of thieves. They were protected by the system, which is dominated by the right, which is dominated by the core of the political force. We have had in the past, in the run-up to the 2010 Soccer World Cup, white companies in the main, construction companies, they colluded and robbed all of us, the taxpayers, of millions of rands. Those white companies were never prosecuted, even though there was prima facie evidence against them. This means that we have a system which, in my view, is not consistent, which, in my view, the justice system, which is not consistent in terms of who to prosecute and who not to prosecute. That has resulted in, creating a fallacious impression to people like Prince that is only the left-leaning people who are a bunch of thieves or who are always on the wrong side of the law. I'm not defending anybody who's on the wrong side of the law, but it's not necessarily true that only the people who are associated with the left are thieves and they can't be trusted with power, and then they are inherently corrupt, which is actually a warped and racially motivated narrative that only black people, who the majority of whom are on the left, are actually inherently corrupt. They are inherently inferior. They can't be trusted with power. They don't know how to manage. They can't govern. And in trusting them with power is to actually take power to the thieves and at the expense of saints who are God chosen, and they can do nothing in this country except building this country and then making everybody prosperous, which is not necessarily true, because if that were the case, the economy currently in South Africa is still dominated by white people. It would have been structurally transformed by now to make sure that it benefits everybody. Unemployment wouldn't have been as rampant as it is now. As we speak now, more than 60% of youths in South Africa, the majority of whom are black, are unemployed. As we speak now, more than 80%, according to the statistics released by Stats SA, more than 80% of the unemployed in South Africa are black women as we speak now. And look at the people who are the richest in South Africa. It's your Johann Rupert, it's your Oppenheimers. Most of those people are white. So the economy is still white dominated, almost 30 years into democracy. If the system, which is dominated by the right, the economic system, was as fair and just and accommodating and inclusive as Prince would like all of us to believe, we wouldn't be having all of these problems in South Africa. Poverty would be affecting everybody, black and white. Unemployment would be affecting everybody, black and white. But unemployment, poverty, inequality, they're all racialized. When we talk unemployment, inequality, and poverty, it's a code for black people. And Prince Mashele doesn't see anything wrong with that.
Andile?
Yeah, the dominant narrative sponsored by Stellenbosch is one of painting those who are fighting the white system as corrupt. Prince would know that Stellenbosch forked out 1 billion rand to sponsor Cyril Ramaphosa against the candidate of President Zuma. The white world was in terror of the move that President Zuma was making. President Zuma stood up in parliament and said, black political parties must unite. As an ANC leader, in fact, Thabo Mbeki responded with a 30-page document saying Zuma is being anti-ANC because the ANC does not speak about blacks. The ANC is non-racial, this thing that Prince is talking about. But President Zuma was clear that we needed to unite all black people to realize the land question. Now, Stellenbosch was terrified, including the mining charter, which was championed by Msebenzi Zwane, which said 30% of mining rights must be given to black people in a year's time. 55% of mining boards must reflect black people. A very radical move, which frightened white capital. White capital then organized to capture the ANC. As we speak right now, the ANC is a captured party, which President Zuma clearly characterized as an instrument of white monopoly capital. But they funded that process. We all know. Nobody can reject the fact that 1 billion rand was used to buy the ANC. As we speak now, the ANC is a party of white monopoly capital. And President Zuma is the biggest threat to that project because of his left-leaning ideological orientation, where he says we must all unite as black people, use our black majority advantage. This is the biggest advantage we have, is our numerical strength, which must be turned into political power. White people, the same friends of Prince, are sponsoring all these small little parties to fracture the black vote so that a fake majority of white people can emerge and they capture the country. As we speak now, it's possible that the deputy president of the country will come from the DA because the DA has already said it is willing to work with Ramaphosa, not any other leader of the ANC, because the ANC is a right-wing political party as we speak. And we must deal with this narrative that corruption is black. You know, people talk about the Gupta's landing in Waterkloof. The Oppenheimers did not even go to the government department. They went to the ANC Lutuli house, the Oppenheimers, and instructed the ANC to give them an international airport of their own inside an international airport of the country. So as we speak, the Oppenheimers control an international airport. They did not land in some strip they own. Imagine what it means. Our diamond, our gold is probably going through this international airport, which is privatized. And they did not go to a government department. They should be in jail, these people. In fact, this is the people that Prince should be making a big noise about, including these people of Steinhoff, who, the Guptas, they didn't know if it owned 5% of the economy, how they captured the state. This is a narrative which is created to simply protect white interests. Steinhoff is the biggest corrupt group in South Africa. And that leader of theirs must be jailed, as the banks who are manipulating the rent. That is economic terrorism. But of course, because the white system is in control, the ANC of Ramaphosa protects it, the state itself is captured, and they will not be brought to book. That is why we need this project of MK to make sure that we bring all these criminals to book.
All right,
So-
can I?
Okay.
Yeah, because it's very fascinating to sit here and listen to these two gentlemen saying things about me
You're also saying things about
that I
them.
don't know. At least the things I say about them, they know. They know, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
We're
They
listening.
say things about me that I don't know. Suddenly, I defended white people. When have I ever said that this just a guy who has stolen public money, by the way? The PIC had invested in that project. Black people. When have I ever said this guy must not be arrested? That this chap is still drinking coffee somewhere in Harmanas. It shocks me. This chap is supposed to be in jail. But apparently I've defended him. I don't know where. So that's the first point. The second point, which is important, is this. You see, and this I will reject always. This idea that because we are black, we must sing from the same hymn sheet, I will never accept. You know what it does? It projects black people as a bunch of imbeciles who who are like animals, who flock in the same direction. They can't have a rich discourse and differ. We are fully human. We can have a debate and differ, black as we are. Any group in the world, by the way, whether Chinese, Indians, whites, if you look at those groups and you would find that they're a vibrant society, they have different ideas. So it is healthy for us to be black and hold different ideas.
But have you seen that their different ideas advance the collective? And our different ideas are dividing our collective.
Here's the thing. Jacob Zuma, right? These people who are called the left, right? At some point had power, state power, right? When white people had state power, he is right. They used state power to advance the interests of white people. They were clear about it. The English did the same about their own. The Afrikaners did the same about their own. What did Jacob Zuma do when he had power? Show me these interests of black people that he has advanced in South Africa. You will not find. Right? Number one. Number two, this chap called Jacob Zuma has been in the ANC since time immemorial. He has been part of the ANC government as an MEC in KwaZulu-Natal, became deputy president and all of that. All of these people have been in the ANC. What has the ANC done over the past 30 years? The ANC over the past 30 years, they have actually destroyed the future of black people. They actually haven't destroyed the future of white people. White people are doing well. They've done well. If you look at black communities, right? Public infrastructure that belongs to us, completely destroyed. By whom? By the ANC government. So I'm not defending anyone. By the way, a guy like Cyril Ramaphosa would be shocked to hear that I am his defender. He knows I don't defend him. So I don't know what these guys are talking about.
Let me stop you there, Prince. By the way, in KZN, the black people are wealthy, by the way. But anyways.
Where?
So in KZN.
Which part of KZN?
In KZN, there's wealth in KZN.
No, in which part of KZN are you talking about?
Okay, wait. So no, I don't want us to go back and forth. Nfuna ubuza something now. Earlier on, you guys were speaking about the media, and you spoke about a sense of euphoria that ANC brought in '94. And when you said that, I thought of the marketing campaign behind '94 and bring peace in our land, and how it almost seems to be playing out every now and then. Even we see it with Stronger Together. There's always this white capital injected euphoria that seems to me is what you're looking for in today's politics. Or am I wrong? And then I'll pass it on to, because it links to the question of the use of media. You and Mahasha earlier were speaking about media and the impact on political campaigns. Then we'll go to Mahasha and Andile. Maybe Mahasha jump in quickly.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Yeah, basically, before I even go there, because I think there is a link between the issue of the media and what Prince said earlier on about the disintegration of the ANC.
Yes.
And what's happening globally.
Yes.
Because the three are not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Yes.
Before I come to the issue of the media, let me say what we are seeing here in the country, which Prince correctly said was part of the broader political realignment, is actually reflective of what's happening globally currently. There is clearly a new world order. The unipolar world has collapsed. The unipolar world in which the US and its Western allies were calling the shots and being dominant has collapsed, and it's actually not different from what we're seeing here. As we speak now, we have a multipolar world. There's China and Russia on the one side, seemingly succeeding in challenging the US domination. Whether you talk about the war in Ukraine, whether you talk about what's happening in Israel as we speak, whether you talk about what's happening in Taiwan, whether you talk about what's happening in the Middle East, you can clearly see that the world has moved away from a unipolar world where America and the West and its Western alliances, its whims, were dominant. So that is finding reflection here in South Africa as well, because there's a bigger political realignment globally. And that realignment is finding expression also in our own country. We don't have a one-party system almost, where the ANC was the dominant player, calling the shots, and everything was centered around the ANC's wishes and aspirations. We are seeing, broader realignments. We are seeing people who, some of whom come from the ANC, coming out and forming their own parties. We are seeing people who have never been in the ANC forming their own parties. But what is clear is that South Africa will never be the same again, and that the ANC will no longer be dominant in South Africa again, and that the right and the center right will no longer dominate South African politics again. Either we're going to see strange coalitions, strange in the South African sense of the word, coalitions where people from different political orientations are forming coalition governments and governing South Africa without one ideological orientation being dominant, or we're going to see a completely new political environment. Where does the media fit in here? The media fits in because if you can check what's happening in the country currently, the South African media has become, some of them have become players in the sense that they perpetuate certain narratives, for the benefit of the dominant socio-economic and political groups, and seemingly go out of their way to paint certain groupings, in this case the left, as a bunch of hooligans who are out to destroy the country, who don't mean well for this country, and who must be rejected at all costs, and who must actually be driven to the sea or be jailed if this country were to be prosperous. Go internationally and look how the media internationally, especially in the US and Europe, seemingly plays the same role. If you go internationally, they have categorized people like Trump, who is a far-right political leader, by the way. His only sin is because he's challenging the status quo in America and globally. It's not even a case of political orientations. They've got a far-right wing leader in the name of Donald Trump, but they don't support him. Why? He is not part of the dominant political faction or grouping in the US. He is actually saying, in this country, things are not going well. Wall Street has become a problem. The private sector and business have become a problem because they keep on funding the same people who are not doing anything to promote America. What they did was that they classified him from the word go, long before the January 6 attacks and in Washington. They classified him as this troublemaker who was out to destroy or spoil the world, who meant no good for America, and who was actually, the opposite of what a normal politician should be. They went out of their way, which is the narrative here in South Africa, perpetuated by people like Prince, is perpetuated against the left. You categorize them as a bunch of hooligans who cannot be entrusted with power. They don't mean well for this country. So the media internationally, they categorize people like Donald Trump, people like Nigel Farage in Britain. They categorize people like President Putin, President Xi. All they say is that these people are bad for the world. Being bad for the world means, in their view, that you are actually challenging the status
can't
quo.
control you.
We can't control you, and you are demanding equity and economic inclusivity on behalf of the global majority or the global south or the majority in your own country, in this case, South Africa. So the media in South Africa, they have become, embedded with the dominant political and economic groupings. In this case, the center right and the far right, because economically they are the ones who are dominant. They seem to understand their role as being that of defending the status quo or defending the interest of the dominant economic groupings and pursuing people who are threatening those interests. In this case, those people happen to be on the left. It's political, the leaders of the unions. It's people who are saying, the root cause of South Africa's problem is actually the structure of the economy. It's actually the fact that land has not been redistributed. It's actually the fact that the economy is still racialized. Once you speak that language, they box you in the camp of the left and then perpetuate a narrative that you're actually bad for this country.
Andile?
Yes, we learn from Karl Marx that the dominant ideas of any society are the ideas of the ruling class. And in South Africa, the ruling class are the owners of the means of production. That is white capital. So the entire media space is controlled by these ideas of the ruling class, and that is why they can demonize you if they perceive you as an enemy. Like Zuma, he's corrupt. He's run the country down, 9 wasted years. The Guptas are the biggest corrupt people, when it's a false narrative. And part of that false narrative is the one that says we don't want land. Look at the PAC. It got a small vote, therefore black people don't want land. Forgetting that, in fact, the PAC was destroyed by white capital and colonialists who funding the ANC and these other new parties to make sure that the status quo remains. So there's this kind of innocence which generate this false narrative to defend white capital and to put back the blame on black people. Black people are burdened with the notions of they being corrupt, with the notion that they run down the state, and all that goes without looking at who actually owns South Africa. And those people who own South Africa, they are creating these multiple political parties, and they are controlling the narrative. The biggest narrative today is that Zuma is corrupt. The Guptas captured the state. This is complete lie, which is told over and over and over again. And our people have internalized these lies and they perceive it as the truth. White capital, the real corruption which is going on, it is not part of the national narratives, because they control the narratives, because they control the means of production and they control the ideas in society. So we have to realize that we are part of the battle of ideas. That is why we must categorize people correctly. Prince is a right-winger. He defends the status quo. He's terrified of this mass, which will be probably led by Zuma and will cause chaos in terms of the order of things, which will harm the interests of white capital. South Africa must continue as is. Black people don't want land. We are lazy. We must come and work for white people. And the Christmas continues. No, we say that must be disrupted. We need to go back to asking the question, what went wrong here? And what went wrong here is the arrival of these people from Europe. They enslaved us, and we continue to be enslaved. We don't own the means of production. We don't own the economy. We are a landless majority. It's a disgrace that 30 years we are still landless in our own country. That is why it's so important that we organize ourselves politically and use our political majority to address this historical mess which we do not create. We did not create the poverty. It was created by white people. They have not even acknowledged this. They have not even paid reparation for colonialism, for slavery, for the genocide they've caused in this country. But you have now black voices which are coming up and magnifying some of the black transgressions as if this is the big problem, so that they basically do this to hide the real culprits who are not part of the conversation. We should not be fighting amongst ourselves. We should be saying the problem is Stellenbosch, the problem is Johan Rupert. These white people must account, they must bring back the land, they must give back the economy. That is the conversation that all black people, what is this thing that black people must not agree? We are all oppressed, all dispossessed. What is the disagreement we can have about redress? It is only those who are part of the white system who disagree with the redress that what black people deserve and must get, and we must organize to make sure that things change for us here.
Yeah, you see, I don't care what Andile says, to be honest. We can say whatever he wants to say.
The intellectual is pissed off.
No, I'm not angry. And by the way, the reason why I don't care is because I'm not angry. I'm very relaxed. I have ideas in terms of how to improve the lives of black people. I have ideas, and I'm going to share them. If Andile thinks they're right-wing or whatever he thinks, I mean, the storm that is raging.
I want to know what you think of MK, actually.
No. Let's say, can I?
Okay, sorry. I apologize.
Didn't disrupt him, and can I?
I apologize.
Yeah. So whatever labels they attach to what I say, it's their business. There's a country, and I'm very glad that he went outside South Africa, because that gives us a sense of perspective. Do you know that we black people, when the outside world look at us, they laugh at us. We are like a laughing stock of the world because of the way we behave. We shout at each other over a thief like Zuma. We have wasted our energy as if this Zuma guy, I mean, he's 82 years old, for heaven's sake. What can he do for black people, this chap? I mean, in a few years, it's going to be senile. We know that, it's nature. So let's park Zuma. The problem is not, this chap is irrelevant. He can run around with Umkhonto Wesizwe. He can't even run, he's old. There's a country called South Korea in Southeast Asia. 70% of that country is mountainous, and I've been there. 70% of that country is mountains, full of tunnels all over. They don't have arable land and all of this stuff that this chap is shouting about. This country has over 50 million people. This country was once colonized by Japan. Go to South Korea today and look at what the Koreans have done for themselves using state power. They've built globally competitive companies. They've built cars. This chap is driving, it's not a Korean car that we've parked outside, probably. If he's not driving a Korean car, he has a Korean cell phone in his pocket, a Samsung, right? They are competing with the best in the world technologically. They have built educational institutions that can compete with the best in the world. They have ended poverty among themselves. They used to be poor. They used to wear rags. They didn't get to this point by making these useless noises that these fellows are making. They analyze and say, what is our problem as a group? How do we dig ourselves out of poverty? And they implemented certain programs. Remember, they don't have land. The whole country is mountains.
That's not true.
So bracket that out. Well, I've been there. He has not been there, this shepherd. He has not been to South Korea. Doesn't know what he's talking about. He probably has read a newspaper article about the country. So, I am saying, black people, wake up. Don't follow these 82-year-olds who are telling you about this and that while they... I mean, this chap, Zuma, if you were to come back to him, he has a whole palace that is huge, right? He's got big pools, right? He's not enjoying that on behalf of black people. He's enjoying that on his own behalf and his family, right? Black people are poor. The majority of black people are poor. I'm concerned about those ones who are poor, turning their lives around. Let's build good educational institutions That's what the white people did in South Africa, by the way, to develop themselves. They built good schools for themselves. Where are these schools that we have built for ourselves as black people? The black child has no future in this country. Why? Because the black government has destroyed the future of the black child. These are the things that are important, that can turn around our lives. I really don't want to waste time with.
Mahasha?
Look, I think, how we can develop South Africa. We can differ on how we can do that. But the point for me is that we cannot forget where we come from and what have been the root causes of black poverty and unemployment and other problems if we are to successfully come up with ideas on how best to address the issue. And one of the issues which I think cannot be avoided is the issue of land. Whether we like it or not, I hear what Prince is saying, that we should look at how to industrialize, look at how best to build, technical skills in the country, how best to utilize political power to industrialize and develop the country. Yes, and those are some of the methods that can be considered. But I don't agree with this idea that those are the only things that we should do. I also believe that looking at South Africa and its demographics and the dynamics in the country, the majority of South Africans still care about their land, whether they want to use it for subsistence farming or whether they want to use for any other thing, or whether game farming or whatever
build
the case
their
may
offices
be.
or build a home.
Land is still important. Why am I saying it's important? It's not necessarily true that if you can't farm, you can't use the land for any other thing. Let's look at places where people, the majority of whom are white, have utilized inherited land to develop themselves, use it as surety to go and get a loan to start a business somewhere. Some of them, if you look at where Four Ways is, the development around Four Ways encroached on what was traditionally a farming area. People sold those farms to the developers and raked in millions of rands, and then they sold the land, and then the developments are taking place. If you look at what is happening in some parts of Limpopo, where I come from, there's been a trend where white people in the main, utilized inherited land to start small entertainment or nature resorts, or to literally, if you drive between Polokwane and Zanin, where I come from, between Polokwane and Tefluop or Mankweng, for a long time, those areas were like plots or farming areas. Now, what the majority of the people there did was to turn those plots into small companies along the main highway, rent out the land to people who want to, start, motor or truck selling businesses, and then they want the freeway. They want to be located next to the freeway. Some of them have started selling the same plots to companies that want to develop in that area, and all it took for them to be owners of the land. So some of them, they've even used the land to develop entertainment areas, public swimming pools, horse riding businesses. But you can't do that if you don't have any piece of land. And that's where I think a lot of people make the mistake of saying that you can only benefit from this land if you want to farm, and then if you can't farm and you are not interested in farming, all you want is life in the big cities. Why the hell do you want to own a piece of land? I think that's where the problem is. We need to deal with the land issue as one of the measures that we need to develop South Africa. But if you also look at the issue of the banking industry, you look at the issue like the mining industry, most of those mines, they are located in areas that are, owned by traditional leaders, for example. The land in those areas are not necessarily owned by traditional leaders. It's tribal land, but I can move into that piece of land and say, please give me this piece of land. I want to build a mall, and I'll go to the bank and get a loan. They'll tell you, no. If you don't have a title deed for that piece of land, we can't give you a loan because that land doesn't belong to you.
We do have a time constraint.
Yes.
Andile, in closing.
Yes. I think that we are not going to make progress when we are subjected to intellectual dishonesty. This man, Prince Mashele here, he wrote a book on this guy, Mahasha.
Hey man, Mahasha.
He puts on the cover of the book that the book is an unauthorized biography. Meanwhile, the truth is that Mashaba edited every sentence. Not only that, he even funded that project. So this man is a discredited intellectual. I don't know why we're still listening to what he says. Then, of course, he progresses by distortion. Japan, South Korea, China develop on the basis of a radical land redistribution project. Go read on South Korea. South Korea undertook, it was a backward country. It developed only once it took the land, redistributed it amongst the peasant, and as a result of accumulation, industrialized. The same happened with Japan, 1945. Japan redistributed land radically to avoid the communist insurgent, which was organizing the landless. They quickly redistributed land and then used the proceeds of this economic accumulation to develop a technologically advanced economy. Land is the foundation of any development. Black people are going to continue to live in township, in squatter camps, and excluded until we address the land question. Less than 1% of the South African white population own about 70% of the land. All the agricultural land is owned by them. That goes with everything else. How can we sit here and not address this question directly and redress it as a historical question? Land was stolen from black people. Land must be returned. And all other conversations are peripheral to this.
Yes.
But we need intellectual honesty. We cannot proceed. Of course, right-wingers are always dishonest.
This is precisely why what is happening in Western Cape with this independence talk, Yindelelo straight. Thank you so much, Andile Mngxitama, Mr. Mahasha Rampedi, Mr. Prince Mashele. I know this conversation, this fight is going to go on after the shoot. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. Moya writes, thank you. You know, we only give you the best. We're trying to navigate against the political system, trying to understand. I know these intellectuals are very deep, so we're trying to make it make sense to us on the bottom. The bank details are on screen right now. Thank you for always supporting us. That is the reason we have episodes. Please like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for joining us. Kamalam Gunontikelelo Wagwa Mazwai in Koskakulu.
Who are you when all you were has been diluted by lies and white lines cancelling out all that which has been written of your history? Why do you look at yourself as a mystery? Doesn't the sun shine because you open your eyes? Doesn't the moon stay situated within the same stars your DNA sparkles off? Your spirit knows that surely corner into it off. Buza umoya so you may return to being well off. Because spiritually you are rich, yet your ancestors cry because you are out of reach. But yours is to command all elements while God takes inspiration from the very mirror she looked at to become. Remember who you are and never finish just when they think that with you they are done.